Hello and welcome once again, all our friends and educators from all over the world, especially here in our part of the world in Southeast Asia. Good evening, good day, good afternoon, good morning to all of you, wherever you may be. I am Roy Platon, the co founder and chief community officer for ACAD Asia. ACAD Asia is a mission driven edtech business based out of Singapore, and we are here to help empower educators everywhere. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. I see that the chat is very lively. I just want to do some shout outs right now. So, welcome to everyone. We have our friends from Indonesia. I see you. Our friends, of course, from Philippines. Hello and good day, good evening to all of you. We also have some friends, I think, from India watching us from our other social media channels and really excited. We're having some slight connection issues, so please don't be surprised if once in a while there might be some video issues, but we'll try to keep the stream live and going. As you know, today is our regular webinar Wednesdays. And for Webinar Wednesday, every week, we have our regular events for ACAD Asia. We usually have our discussion and live chat events. Hello. So I see you in the chat. Yeah. So I see Divesh from India. I see Sawion, Hien from Cambodia. Hi, everybody. So this is great. Really having an international audience today. We have some friends from Batangas City in Philippines, Laguna City, Philippines. And of course, we're very glad to have you all. This is part of our regular series, Webinar Wednesdays, where we bring speakers and experts to discuss important topics that educators should be tackling on hand, right? So, here we have even Azulea from Malaysia. Hello, hi to all of you. Very, very wide audience today. Great to see all of you. So, today is a very interesting topic because we'll be talking about design thinking. Okay, so design thinking is a very interesting topic because maybe you've heard of this concept before, maybe it's your first time. But today, to shed light on the subject matter, I'm very glad that we have our guest speaker for today. So I'll introduce him. He is a senior lecturer with the Singapore Polytechnic School of Business, and he's been there for over 20 years, teaching modules such as marketing, oversees social innovation projects, advertising, and public relations. He's also involved in the broadcast industry as a television host, actor, and content creator. So he's very comfortable in front of the camera. So I'm really glad to have him here with us today. And he's also quite an experienced educator. So without further ado, I'd like to bring onto the stage uh, Mr. Rajan, Mr.
Hi,
Thiagarajan.
everyone. Yes,
Hi,
Tyagarajan. Yeah,
hello, Mr. Thiagarajan. We can just call you
yeah.
Rajan. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, today is very special because it's World Teachers Day. So happy Teachers Day to you, sir.
Thank you. And so to everyone here, okay, wish you a happy Teachers Day, Teachers Month, I think. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I think this whole month we're
Mm,
celebrating.
mm,
So this is our month, dear
yeah.
teachers. So wherever you are,
Mm,
a happy
mm,
Teachers Day to all of you. And this is a good opportunity for us to kind of learn something a bit new about this concept called design thinking. So uh, as I mentioned, I guess Rajan, when we talk about design thinking, and
mm,
we've invited you today to kind of share your thoughts about this.
mm,
Um, this practice was originally, developed some years ago at Harvard University as an approach
mm,
for collaboration and problem solving, and it's a way for groups and teams to actually identify challenges, get information, find ideas and solutions. However, this is quite a general concept, and maybe you can help shed some light to us. And today, we'd like to be able to see how we can apply this to, or how it can be useful for educators in the classroom, right? And if this is kind of a mindset that can help improve how we teach and how our learners have a good experience in the classroom today. So I'm sure this will be a very interesting topic for you. And um, maybe I'd start off with this for our dear teachers here and educators in the audience today. A little bit later, we'll be flashing our Mentimeter link. So you will be able to post your questions about our discussion today on that Mentimeter link. So, and towards the end of the session, maybe around after about 30, 45 minutes, we'll open the floor to those questions and we'll have our discussion about that. So please stay tuned and watch out for that Mentimeter link that will be posted shortly on your screens. So, Rajan, if I could ask, so when we talk about design thinking, can you help shed some light on it? So it's like it's two words, right? Design and thinking. So how do these two combine to come up with the design thinking framework? Is it a process? Is it a mindset? What's your definition of this design
Actually, I
thinking?
read your email where you had asked that is it a process, a framework, or is it a mindset? And interesting, you should ask why design thinking, right? And I have experienced this in my polytechnic. Where I've got broadly two sets of students. One are the business types and the creative types. The other is the engineering types. So often when you put these two groups together, there's going to be a clash. The engineering students will be very logical, will be thinking through, how to solve a problem and so on. But it may not be creative enough or may not be marketable. If you take the creative types, the solutions may be very creative, but it may not be practical or difficult to produce something out of it. So the challenge should be how to bring these two groups together, right? And then to make them talk, to make them think, to make them involved in activities that will capitalize on their strengths and make sure they are focused on what they are discussing. So hence the term design, perhaps for the way you can draw up something and so on. And for the engineering students, the thinking part, perhaps to extract the creativity out of them. Right. And this is nothing different from various other thinking methods, really. You have the six thinking hats from the yesteryear, you have the scenario planning, and so on. All these are thinking approaches primarily to make sure that you are focused on achieving your end, right? And to make sure you have incorporated all kind of factors and elements in it. And design thinking is one such approach. The beauty of this is that it incorporates elements from various other fields. For example, I did sociology and anthropology. And one of the aspects of this is ethnographic studies. And you find that design thinking make sure that you go into that to understand the people, the way they think, the way they operate, the circumstances they are in, and so on. And then you have concepts like prototype, which makes it fun to come up with quick solutions so that whoever the user can get an idea of how the final solution is going to look like. It involves, when you talk about design thinking, very famous, use notice post-it pads. And that also makes it fun because it makes sure that you are able to capture every data that you have collected through a conversation, through the storytelling. And the term storytelling means that you're going to get information out of your participants, out of your target audience by making them tell you stories. And out of these stories, you pick up important points. And to make sure that you pick up the important points, the clustering comes in by using the post-it pads and so on.
Okay,
So I'm not good.
so
Yeah.
yeah, Rajan, if I could kind of just break it down a little bit because you kind of pointed out a lot of important concepts, and I just want to make sure that we're following along with you. So you mentioned at the beginning that design and thinking, and you mentioned that it involves groups of people and participants. So I guess when you say design, who are you thinking about and what are you designing it for? It's usually designing usually for human beings or groups of people and teams that are attempting to solve problems, right? And you mentioned earlier that
Yeah.
there's different approaches, there are different kinds of personalities and people. You mentioned the creative people and the engineering people, and when they
Yeah.
approach it, maybe some creatives will have very interesting unique out of the box solutions, but they're not as
mm,
practical. Then you have, let's say, more technical engineering based solutions
mm,
that maybe are too technical, right? And sometimes
yeah,
too process driven. So I guess what you're saying is it's not only a mindset, but a process, as you were describing, where you get groups of people together who have different approaches and they gather to kind of solve a problem to achieve a certain outcome, as you said,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
So it starts, you have asked the question earlier whether it's a process, framework, and mindset. It starts with the process,
mm,
meaning go through these phases you have, step one, step two, step three, and step four. At some point, you'll be so comfortable, you'll say, okay, I'll treat this as some tools in my toolkit and see how I can approach a problem. At the ultimate stage, perhaps, without even you thinking about it, you're going to practice it. And that's where it becomes a mindset, right?
yeah, I agree with you
So
there
it's
because
all three.
it's similar to, like, intuitively as human beings we're already built to
Mm,
problem solve, right? So,
mm,
and I think, as you
yeah,
mentioned, the design thinking, as you get more used to that approach among the many other approaches, it'll
mm,
become more natural. And as you were saying
yeah,
a while ago, I think you were describing some steps of the process already. There was
yeah,
the information gathering. Usually, if it's
yeah,
done as a group, you have the post-its and you write it down, then you
yeah,
cluster them, and then you kind of have
yeah,
sharing. So that you're describing there the whole process that
yeah,
usually accompanies design thinking, right?
yeah. It's supposed to be fun, right? And I'm
Mm,
not going to give you a step blow by blow explanation of how it is done because it's very clearly explained online and so on.
mm,
So I just gave you snippets of what is happening. But the important thing is that it is supposed to be fun and engaging, right? And that is why the post-it pads, the prototypes, and so on. And as to how I make use of it in my education journey, the important aspect of this is persona. Because after you have gathered your information, you've clustered, you've come out with your problem statements and so on, you're also supposed to think in terms of the persona, which describes the target audience or the participants or whoever that you're looking at. So every semester, before when I enter a class, but okay, before that itself, I go through all their grades, their GPAs, the kind of modules that they have done well, the kind of modules they have not done well, comments by their previous lecturers, and so on. So I have an idea roughly how these students are going to be. And when I enter the class, I ask a few questions. And based on these questions, very quickly, I can say, okay, again, it depends on whether they're going to respond to the questions at all in the first place. In a
mm,
class of 20, if 15 respond, okay, I can go in a certain direction. If only 5 respond, I've got to take another direction. So, which direction I'm supposed to go is based on persona. A persona is a, a combination of all these characteristics you have picked up through your interviews with your participants, right? So it gives you an idea how these participants are going to behave. So to give you an example, I will classify students in terms of their attitude and aptitude for a simple thing. Some students, so if you have an axis like this, so one axis is attitude, the other is aptitude. You
mm.
have students who have got very good aptitude and attitude. So if you have a class of 20 with 15 like them, you're going to fly, right? The students will fly, you will fly because they are all raring to go. Some will have some will not have the attitude and aptitude. They have given up on their studies. So
Right.
then you're going to have a difficult time with them. Now,
Yeah.
within these two extremes, you have those who have a good aptitude, meaning they can study well, but they don't want to study. Or you have the others who want to study, good attitude and so on, but they do not have the capacity for it. So you should be able to determine very quickly where most of your students fall into these categories, right? So for
Hmm.
me, that's the way persona helps me. Then I would have to go into how do I encourage them? How do I bring out the best in them? So that is one.
Right.
Now, one
If
of
I
the,
could interject here, Rajan, a
yeah,
little bit. So
yeah,
when you say aptitude, I guess these are like the comprehension skills, the processing skills of the students, and that's one
processing
aspect.
skill,
Yeah, the
yeah,
way they're able to think and solve problems, and then the
yeah, yeah,
attitude skills is meaning how engaged they are, how enthusiastic they
yeah,
are, or
yeah, yeah,
how let's say they're not into it,
yeah.
right? So you were mentioning it,
Yes,
design
yes,
thinking is supposed to be fun, right? So
yeah.
usually when you're kind of grouping your class that way, I mean, how do you make it fun for the learners when you're kind of initially proposing this framework and this design, and you're
Hmm.
getting data from them, but how do you kind of introduce it to those learners so that it appears fun? What is this
Uh,
persona thing that they're trying to develop?
So to classify them this way is important because it is then going to determine how adventurous you are going to be with your participants. If
Mm,
let's say most of the participants, in terms of attitude, it's not so great, and aptitude is not so great. The first few weeks will be spent encouraging them and convincing them that trying a different approach is worthwhile. On the other hand, if their attitude and aptitude is first class, then you'll find that you don't have to do much convincing. You just need to think in terms of how to make it interesting for them.
so you're
So
talking about
once
how
I,
to introduce design thinking processes in your classroom, right? So it starts with
yeah, yeah,
identifying your student learner.
identifying, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Then you got to think, then what I ask them, three basic questions I ask them. Whatever the module I'm teaching, what do you want to learn? How do you want to learn? And how do you want to be tested? Because
Ah.
if you look at ourselves, most of us, or maybe all y'all were good students. For me, I hated studying. I hated going to school. And my results were bad. Right. So in which case, when I look back, I said, what were the lessons that I enjoyed? I enjoyed lessons where I was brought outside of the classroom. I enjoyed lessons where I could be open about the questions I could ask. No, I like this. But at the same time, there are students who may not appreciate this kind of approach. So,
Hmm.
which is why I have to check with them, okay, how do you want to learn? And what do you want to learn? Meaning, not in terms of just the content, there are other things that they may want to learn. For an example, I want to be a good speaker. I want to be able to talk to others. I want to think creatively and so on. These may not be part and parcel of your module content, but students may have an interest in knowing this because they know that this can be applied in the working world. So then I have an idea whether what they are looking for, and then I'll work with them to find out what are the approaches we can take. And this is called co-creation also, right?
And
At
this
some point, you got to think,
co-creation, yeah, this co-creation
yeah,
approach, when you're asking the learners about this, I guess you're
yeah,
talking about more a tertiary level learner context because they have some degree of independence, right? Versus if you're talking about younger students, maybe it's more regimented, right?
exactly. I'm glad that you asked that. I was going to come to that. Yeah, yeah. I would have almost forgotten that point. But
Mm.
strangely enough, I've been teaching secondary school students, so it's an elective in their schools. I go there to teach them. And I've taken the same approach with them, and
Mm.
they like it. Okay,
So even
precisely
secondary, so
because of
these
the
are
word
high
you
school
use,
students. Yeah,
regimented.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
even though precisely because of the word you use, regimented, and they
Mm.
are able to see that, hey, this is a different approach,
Mm.
and it seems as though they've been looking for something like that, right? And then, of course, the next question could be, then why is it not used in all classroom settings?
Yes.
Because if you're looking for consistency, if you're looking for repetitive kind of teaching and so on, taking this design thinking approach will mean that every semester, every academic year, you're going to change your approach. And when you have 20 classes, for an example, in a year, you
Mm,
can't be varying your teaching method for each and every class, because at a high school level, like in Singapore, they'll be sitting for a national exam. So you
mm,
cannot have a varied approach for teaching all these. But
mm.
where they are able to do that, like in an elective, the students do appreciate that.
Yeah, so this approach really is also depending on the context. Maybe for
Mm,
secondary schools that require more specific standards that they have to follow, you can try maybe a little bit just to give them a sample. But
yeah,
when you get to
yeah.
tertiary, then they have
Mm,
electives to have more flexibility to try a different approach, to try a different course. And I think their design thinking really fits well.
yeah.
And that's to say that you can
What
also
it
apply
also
that to
means is
other,
that
right? Yeah, go ahead.
wherever it could be an organization, where they're looking for a solution to a problem, it could be a community problem that you're facing, all of this.
Mm,
But what is important is that you must learn how to have a conversation. Often you find that education is about top down. Okay, I'm here to deliver the lesson, I'm going to deliver it. That's about it. I ask you a question, you answer. But often a dialogue is missing. Design thinking, in a lot of ways, forces you to have that dialogue. Because in order to
mm,
understand what the students are thinking, you have to constantly ask them, okay, what do you think of this approach? Why do you like it? And all these questions I'm asking, you'll notice they are open ended. I'm
mm.
not asking them, okay, did you like the question approach? Yes, no, not that. We don't want that. We want the students to open up. The moment they open up, they are going to be confident about giving you fresh ideas, which is exactly what you need to make the lesson interesting. But
Mm,
it can be scary. It can be very scary, because the moment you've raised the expectation of the students, you have to deliver, right?
understood. Yeah.
Because not, you have asked them, how do you want to be tested? What do you want to learn? And when they have given you the wish list, and if you're not able to deliver, then the message is going to spread and say, well, he's just asking, he's not going to deliver, and so on. So every semester becomes a challenge. Right?
Right,
So,
right, and that's an interesting point you bring up because then
mm,
that those are some of the benefits, I guess, of this design thinking approach because it makes the lesson more interesting. You get
yeah,
more involvement and engagement, and
mm,
enforce. I guess the students feel more invested in this in what they
mm,
want to learn because the you as the educator ask them explicitly, how do you want to learn? What is it you want to learn? And this is how we're going to
yeah,
approach it and co-create it
mm,
together with them. So that then the outcome
mm,
of the learning that they get also involves them. It cannot be the top
yeah,
down, just always
mm,
relying on the knowledge authority, so to speak.
yeah,
It also came from the learner, wherein how and what do you want to learn exactly?
yeah. And a lot of lessons that we want to conduct, you'll find that we don't have to be there. Lecturers are not necessary. I know it is a very dangerous statement and it put me out of a job. And you say lecturers are not necessary. What I mean is that the content that we intend to teach, you find that the younger generation can get them online. So the
Yes.
challenge for us then becomes how do I go beyond that? How do I give them something that they won't be able to get that easily from textbook? So let me give you an example. You'll find that when you take the younger generation, let's forget about the younger generation or older generation. All of us love to get out of the classroom and go outdoors, look at things, and so on. All the more
Mm,
so if you are brought to the shopping belt. In Singapore, you have the Orchard Road, and so on. You have the shopping malls, you bring them there.
mm,
No one is going to tell you it's boring compared to a classroom. So when
mm,
I teach advertising, what I do is that, okay, tomorrow we are going to Orchard Road. Orchard Road is our shopping belt. Okay. Then I tell them, I'll meet you all there at a certain time. Now, I've got their attention because compared to coming to a classroom and going to a shopping belt, I've won their hearts and minds already. So
mm,
they come there. Then I say, okay, now we are going to learn about advertising. I want you, you have assembled as a group. I want you to go from point A to point B, which could be about 1 or 1.5 kilometers away. Observe all the advertisements you come across. It's a group of 20. Each of you will identify for me an advertisement or a poster which fascinated you. And then we'll gather back again, go through the same route, but this time each one of you are going to explain to the group why that particular poster or display fascinated you. And then what happens is that based on what we have explained, then I'll tell them these are the advertising concepts that you have identified without knowing about it in the first place. So it's a different approach, meaning that I can teach you the concept and then make you go and find something, or you find something and explain to me why it fascinated you, and then I explain to you how it is linked to a concept. Okay. Now that is one thing. Secondly, it makes the students feel good. They feel good because there they are in a busy thoroughfare, 19 pairs of eyes watching them and listening to them. They also notice that whoever is passing by is also stopping to listen to them. And this boosts their confidence, their morale, that they are the center of attention. So this is what I mean by there are other things that you could bring in. But whatever the case, you'll find that they are learning something, but most importantly, I have shifted the environment in which I would teach them. Instead of the classroom, they are outside. And if you ask any youth where they want to learn, I'm sure they'll tell you they don't want to be in the classroom. And that is how I cater to their needs. So that is one of the approach that I have also.
Yeah, very interesting, John. And I just want to share with you. I know you're talking about Nilesh, our CEO, a while ago, and he's watching us live now. And he also says here in the comment, design thinking can be used to make the lesson more experiential, right? And that, to your point in your example, is exactly what you did. You're teaching an advertising class. You let the students experience it firsthand by going to the shopping mall, and they make observations, and that gets them more engaged. You've won their hearts and minds, and they're actually, you're trying to see, they build up their confidence to express themselves in that kind of different setting, right? So it's another way, it's another approach of getting input and feedback. And I guess you can also do this. I'm sure, like, we're coming back to the classroom. Hopefully, some of the students are excited to see their classmates, and they don't mind seeing in the classroom, and then maybe they can go outside and do stuff together. Right?
Exactly. Thanks for pointing that out. You've touched on something on why I really do this. Because when you put them inside a classroom, they are clustered around a few tables, and the interaction does not go beyond the table they are seated in. Whereas when you bring them outside, when they are traveling from one point to another, suddenly you see them start talking to each other, laughing, making jokes and so on. And you're right. When they come back to the classroom, they bring the togetherness back into the classroom. Then what happens is that when they want to present something, they're no longer shy or embarrassed to make mistakes. And that's how creativity comes about. You being able to say something stupid. And I take pride in that. I take pride and lead the way in saying, look, I'm going to say something stupid, because if I'm going to say something that is so sane, everyone has said that. It doesn't involve any other thinking. I want to push. No, I want to come up with something. Let's try it. Any solution, let's try it. A lot of time I've been told by other lecturers, are you sure you can trust your students? Are you sure they can do this? Sometimes I expose my students to people at a very high level. They say, are you sure? And so I say, I trust them. I've trained them enough. They can do it. And that is something that the students want. They want exposure. Which then goes back to the first question, what do you want? What do you want? How do you want to study? And so on. Or how do you want to learn? Right?
Absolutely.
But the most important thing is, of course, right. You see, what also becomes a problem is that, which means that you'll never find a final solution. Every semester is a prototype. Because every semester the dynamics change, the combination of students change, and so on. But for me, that's what makes it interesting.
Right. And there are a lot of benefits of doing this approach. I guess for our audience here, if you have tried this design thinking before, I think we have some teachers here who actually apply and use design thinking. You've seen the benefits, you've seen more engagement from students. They are able to think for themselves and problem solve for themselves. They might challenge you, they might challenge some of the ideas, but that's
Yeah.
okay because nowadays like they have access to all this knowledge on the internet or videos and what have you. They have their own subcultures and understandings, but you also as an educator have your own set of learnings experiences, and that's you kind of model that together to come up with solutions in everyday life. And for the rest of the audience, let's say that is hearing about design thinking for the first time, and as Mr. Rajan was sharing a while ago, it might be a good idea to kind of test the waters and see this approach on a more longer term basis. Maybe a small portion of the weeks of your class, you try it out for the first semester and see if it clicks, and then refine that on the next semester and the next. So what I hear from you, Rajan, is this is something that you can experiment with if this is something that they're trying for the first time, and see this approach, design thinking approach, and just try it out and see as you refine it as you go along.
Okay. And for me, I was privileged to have Nilesh as my colleague, because one of the things that I myself as an educator needed and still need is inspiration, someone to bounce ideas, someone to say that I used to tell Nilesh, I hate you because you're always one step ahead of me and so on. I want to be the best, right? But that itself is an inspiration, because in trying to beat him, then I have to think differently, right? If not, I'll be so jaded saying that, yeah, I have experimented, I know what to do, and so on, and I'll be satisfied with that. And I don't want to do that. The reason I'm saying this is because as an educator, your personality also must be like that. When you find someone who is better than you must be willing to admit that, yeah, that fellow is better. I'm going to beat that fellow, right? And of course, with Nilesh, I'll tell him straight in the face the same thing I've been telling in here, is it? Because I'm not shy about it. I'm not shy about this. If you're better, I'll learn from you, right? And so
And
you
that's
also have to
the
find a partner. Yeah.
yeah, that's the positive
Yes, you're
approach
saying?
to it, right? So rather than so let's say in among educators in our schools,
Mm,
you might know if colleagues are really excellent and
mm,
amazing.
mm.
Instead of looking at it as no, I can never be that good, I'll just give up. You can see it as a positive challenge that I can just be as good as that fellow colleague of mine. Probably even do better than they can. So the mindset, the approach is different. Use it as motivation.
That is a much more positive approach when you say that I cannot do it. I'll tell you what is a negative approach. A negative approach is that there may be your colleagues who will tell you, well, he's really not teaching anything, he's just bringing them to the shopping malls.
Hmm.
So which means that they are bad mouthing whatever that you are doing.
Yeah, they're
They may not
criticizing
want
it.
to look at the
Yeah.
results, criticizing you. You see, so that can be
Hmm.
very demoralizing for someone young and wishing to experiment and so on. When you hear such things, you yourself are torn. Am I going to carry on experimenting, or am I going to be, listen to all these comments, negative comments that are coming to me? Shall I just stop? Okay, that means you got to understand your own personality. Are you willing to, without antagonizing anyone, are you willing to believe in what you're doing? And that belief can only come about when the students come back to you and say, I enjoyed your lesson and I learned much more than what the module content wanted to deliver.
Yeah, and that's a great outcome, right? If you're able to kind of deliver it, I think then it shows that the approach, the design thinking approach, succeeded because the feedback you got from students, I really enjoyed your class. I found it super interesting, and I learned something. Yeah.
And the feedback might not come to you immediately. I've
Hmm.
had students who 4 years later send me a message and say, Rajan, when you brought us to that conference to expose us and so on, You foster us to do such things. Now that I'm working, when I'm facing all these people in the management, I find that I have the confidence to face them. Right.
Mm,
And
mm,
of course, at that point, they also admit they felt very frustrated. Why is he doing this to us? Why
mm,
is he
mm.
making us talk to, people here, attend boring conferences and so on? But they only realize it much later. So, which means as an educator, you must understand the persona of your students and how you want to transform them. And in the process of transforming them, they may not see the immediate benefit because you're still students. But you
Mm,
must
mm.
understand how they fit into the workforce, what is required, and drive them towards it.
That's right. That's right. And in
Yeah.
fact, just to touch on a couple of the points that you were mentioning just now, like there's maybe some challenges that occur when you try to do this design thinking approach. So, for example, you have a project, you ask the students to go out into the real world, get information, come back, cluster the ideas, and give conclusions or hypotheses or solutions based on those data gathering steps. So they'll say, "Why are you making us do all these work and effort?" But in the end, like later on, they realize, "Wow, I'm thankful Mr. Rajan allowed me to or made me do it
Yeah.
because there's some value to it and I'm able to kind of express myself and defend my ideas better." So um, there's a lot of questions in the chat, Rajan. I'm just going to try to quickly go through
Okay.
our summary questions because it'll be interesting.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
it'll be able to answer our guide questions as we answer the questions
Yes.
in
Yes.
the audience
Yes.
at the same
Yes.
time.
Good.
So some of the questions in the chat are here is this approach applicable to uh, you know struggling learners who are not able to embrace this idea of design thinking, or is it applicable to various subjects? We have other specific questions here. Is it applicable in a grammar class or other class? So there are a lot of challenges in applying the design thinking approach. Is it flexible in terms of the subject matter? What happens if the student is a bit disinterested?
Frank, when it comes to design thinking, it is helpful to show students that let's try a different approach. Okay, let's
Mm,
try something different. And as to whether it will work on a student, sometimes it depends on, as you correctly pointed out, okay, what happens if it's a English class, English lesson that you have? These are foundational modules. And sometimes I agree with such foundational modules, it may be difficult to see how to make it more interesting, to understand how to motivate someone to learn English.
mm,
If you can motivate me to learn maths, mathematics, you are a brilliant teacher because I
mm,
hated maths. But at some point, I did pick up an interest in it. You see? So, yes. So, firstly, do I hate the subject? Secondly, how do I make it interesting? Now, this is where I use the approach of confessing the kind of student I was. Because if you were to look at a class of 20, I was most probably at 19 or 20. So when I tell students that, in fact, I tell in my class, if I were to apply for a place in your course with my scores, I will never be admitted. But yet I'm here teaching you. Now, this strikes a chord even with the student who's not performing well. Suddenly he identifies with me. So I need
mm,
to get that first. Because most often they come across teachers who have performed well throughout their learning years. So
mm,
students sometimes find that, okay, this lecturer will not understand my problem. So firstly, I win that. Then I have a conversation with them separately, saying how I, again, the same thing. How do you want to learn? What is holding you back? You know, and then what happens is that the smallest success that they achieve, I celebrate it.
mm,
They might be presented well. Then I say, wow, that's good, and so on. And I know this is really to motivate them. So my hope is that by motivating them and showing because sometimes they never come across any compliments from any lecturer, right?
Mm.
Because they are the bottom few. The moment they are able to see that, oh, Rajan, he said he liked the way I present and so on, it gives them a cause for celebration. Then, when the others see that, okay, this student whom they had thought is not going to perform well and so on is being appreciated, suddenly they look at him or her from a different perspective. So,
Right.
as to whether it's interesting or not, it is quite difficult to achieve. But as to whether I can get this student to be shown in a positive light, that could be tried. And design
Mm.
thinking allows you for that because it's not
Yes.
a conventional approach. You go there, you present, and that's about it. It forces you to think differently, right?
Mm.
So when a
Mm.
student displays that, celebrate it.
Right. So, for example, if it's an English or grammar class, try to
Mhm.
make it more experiential so that they can
Yeah.
probably, let's say, practicing conversational discussions and what is the right grammatical, and make it more experiential. And then for, let's say, slow learners or challenge learners, the design thinking approach allows them to shine because it's not the conventional, way of rewarding performance. If they do some little success, that is something that they can already be proud of, and that kind of builds their confidence also.
Thanks for reminding me of that. I used to teach writing and so on. So the best
Mm.
way to, I don't know whether this is the best way. I said, look, I'm not going to be bothered about teaching you writing. Just go around the campus or anywhere and identify for me posters or whatever there are, uh, sentences which have grammatical and structural errors and so on. And students love it because it is not about finding mistakes in what they have written. It is about finding mistakes in something someone else has written. Now, so they go around, they look for it, and so on. By looking at the identifying mistakes made by someone else, they themselves realize that they should not make the same mistakes. Right? So they are
Mm.
actually teaching themselves by making such observations. Right?
Right,
Because in
right.
advertisements, writing copies is an important aspect. I cannot write long sentences. It has to be short to the point and crisp. Right?
Mm. Mm.
So this is how I convey lessons on the English language.
Great. I'll go to some other questions here in the chat. There are several. So, for
Mm,
example, but although
mm.
our discussion now, we've answered some of them already. One question here um, is design thinking different or similar to project-based learning? What's the difference between project-based learning
Okay,
and
there was
design
sorry,
thinking?
there was a disruption just now. Can you start again? Can you start
Oh,
again? There was a disruption just now.
yeah.
Mm.
There's a question. How is design thinking similar or different to project-based learning?
Project based or the PB or problem based learning, I
Yeah,
believe it's
problem
about
based.
the same.
Mm.
Now, problem based learning is that okay, you give them a problem, and then the students, by conducting research, they will identify solutions for that. And therefore, the solutions could be from anywhere, or the approach could be anything. Whereas with design thinking, this is where the process part comes in. It
Mm.
forces you to take a certain approach. But like problem based learning, design thinking also forces you to keep an open mind. In fact, you take any management strategy, it is always about keeping an open mind, just that design thinking takes a different approach. In problem based learning, there's a lot of independence that should be given to the student to identify different solutions and different approaches and so on. But in design thinking, as a process, there are certain steps that they have to do. But in terms of coming up with a solution, and this is where ideation comes in, the kind of ideas that they come up with, they are given complete freedom, right?
Mm.
So both areas there are freedom. There's freedom given to the students, just that with design thinking, there's specific steps the student needs to take.
Yeah, I want to add to what you mentioned there, Rajan. I think also, let's say, a problem based or project based approach implies that there is already a clearly identified problem or issue, and
Mm.
then they have to work on it to create the solutions. Whereas design thinking is like maybe a couple of steps before that. You observe, you empathize
Yep.
with the people and the audience that is having that issue. Then you that's how you define the problem before you start solving it. And the design thinking
Yes.
approach
Thanks for
allows
that.
you, right, to do that.
Yeah. In fact, thanks for that. Sometimes it is possible that the students themselves who are practicing design thinking and the community or the business people whom you are working with, both
Mm,
parties may not realize there's a problem in the first place
yes.
because they may not have observed, they may not have just asked questions, so on and so forth. Then sometimes when we ask questions and come up with a problem statement, the managers in an organization or in a community say that, oh, we didn't realize that there was such a problem. Right?
Mm,
So you're absolutely right. We
mm.
start without anything there and then identify what the problem is.
Yes, yes. Great, fantastic. So, okay, a couple of other questions here. I think in the comments, um, there was one question is some K to 12 schools are trying to implement this, but the real challenge is that um, teachers on this level are not able to I guess deliver on this in this manner, right? So it's basically a new concept, a first time they are hearing
Okay,
of
there was
design
a
thinking.
disruption.
So sorry, Rajan. Yeah, again, pardon.
Okay, there was a disruption just now. Okay. Mm.
Yeah, we're flashing the question on the screen. It's from Anumpam Kaushik, and he's asking some K to 12 schools are trying to implement this, but on this level of design thinking for their school levels. But how do you suggest to improve or capacitize teachers to be able to use the design thinking approach in their instruction? And I think we touched on this already
That's
earlier. I
a
think you were suggesting that
very
they
sensitive.
they try it out in small steps, right?
You see, this goes a bit beyond that. It is also about convincing the other teachers that it can work.
Mm,
The only way that can be done is that to show that your method, even with this incremental steps you're taking, is successful. That means you got to create a spokesperson among your students. You cannot force them to go out there and tell the other teachers, wow, it was great, and so on, because the students themselves will feel that, oh, this teacher is making use of me. And the other teacher also can feel that, oh, they are just so what I do, and this my person is I let my results speak for themselves. I let the students, and how students do it is when they post how happy they are in their Facebook or in their social media. Because you cannot force a student to express their happiness and satisfaction in their social media. So when they do that, okay, it's a testimony that okay that I've done something correct. But in order to, it will be better if all teachers can collaborate, right? And this is where you'll find that maybe for some lessons, there could be co teaching, perhaps. Some lecturer or teacher who may not feel so confident, who co teaches with someone who's a bit more experienced, and then learns the ropes through that way, right? And slowly they take over the reins and
Rajan, did we lose you? I think again, apologies. I think we're having some connectivity issues. I hope it's not me that's been disconnected. I don't know if we still have Rajan there. I think we may have lost Rajan temporarily. So we'll just wait for a few moments for him to return and his connectivity restores itself. So again, apologies. Where he is now, the connectivity is choppy. But we'll wait for him and we'll have him come back. In the meantime, I'll try to continue by mentioning, if you can see in our chat, there are a lot of questions of how to implement design thinking. So in 2 weeks' time, we have a virtual workshop at Asia where we will be showcasing how you can actually apply design thinking in your own practice and in your own schools. So if you would like to, like, it's like a quick crash course, right? A sampler of how you do actually design thinking. So it's going to be very fun. We can do it online tools as well, or and in that online tool workshop type approach, you get to experience. Oh, okay, so this is what design thinking is about. It's fun in the sense that you get a lot of ideas and try to kind of build them and bring them together. So we'll post that. So follow us. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be having a workshop about this design thinking process. And I think Rajan is back. I'm gonna bring him back into the stream. Hi, Rajan. Are you back?
Hi,
Can you hear
hi.
us?
So, as I was just before, yes, I'm back. Thanks. Right. So, just before I left, I was saying that sometimes, or many a times,
Unfortunately, I think Rajan's connection at his place is really choppy because we're losing him again. um, we'll just see if he comes back. All right. So don't worry, stand by. We'll probably
okay,
tackle a couple of questions. Okay, you're back,
okay,
Rajan. You're caught up. You're
okay,
back.
back, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're saying.
So, when you talk about design thinking and educators at a K-12 level, all parties need encouragement. The students, but especially the educators. It is going to be something new for them. So it's better if someone senior and experienced handholds them, shows them the way, and after showing the way, let the junior or inexperienced lecturer try it. Okay. And while this is happening, we cannot let the momentum within the group, the students and so on, go down. We have to keep it interesting, keep it engaged. Let them ask questions. Let students ask you questions. You answer their questions. You ask questions. Keep it as a dialogue, a conversation. So that could be a way out. Well, I'm talking from a Singapore context where students sometimes are used to the idea of the teacher tells me everything. So when we give them a chance to open up, they find it very uncomfortable. They might say, why should I ask question? Teaching is one way. Then to make them open up is difficult. The moment you achieve that, make them open up and make them feel that, hey, it is fun talking to the lecturer or the teacher, then we may progress towards something.
Great. All
It's
right,
not going to be
Rajan.
easy. That I confess. Hmm.
That's sure, but even if it's not going to be easy, it's interesting, and I think it's
Hmm.
worthwhile because depending on the year level and application,
Yes,
it can be
yes.
done. So, just a couple of rapid
Hmm.
fire questions while we still have you on the stream. Really quick answers to these, so that before we
Hmm.
wrap up. Um, so, uh, is there
Hmm.
a maximum number of students in a classroom or in a setting that can do design thinking? Is there a minimum or maximum classroom size? And then the second question after that is design thinking more designed for face to face, or can it be also done in a virtual classroom? So, first is the classroom
Okay.
size,
It
the
is
next is
better
the
in a group. A classroom size 20 so far has been comfortable for me. You can divide them into 4 groups, and within each group there are 5 who bring in different types of ideas and so on, but you have to make sure that it's a good mixture, right? So that has to be ensured. And the second question was, apart from
Is
group
design
size,
thinking is only for? Is
sorry,
it only
what
for
was the
face to
second
face?
question again? Sorry.
Is it only for face-to-face classes, or can also be for virtual or online classes or
Oh,
blended learning classes?
we have tried it virtual, especially during the pandemic, but somehow the interaction is not so great. Of course, there are apps to mimic the post-it pads, but
Hmm.
students often find it quite cumbersome because suddenly they'll have to enlarge the post-it pad. Sometimes they have to reduce it. Then at a certain time they have to increase. And so using post-it pad is supposed to be messy, but when you do it in person, it becomes fun. But somehow when you do it online, it just becomes, it just irritates you. So better if it is face to face, unless you don't have a choice. Somehow looking at the other person, the way the person responds, and the way you can encourage the person with a smile or a nod is not the same when you do it online.
I agree with you, Rajan. Obviously, any interaction like that that involves animated reactions and
Mm,
discussion, face to face is always the best. But in our
mm,
experience in Acadesia, we've done design thinking sessions with the Department of Education in Philippines and other groups virtually. We used Miro and other online tools. There is some learning
mm.
curve, but we were still able to get a lot of interactions. It also depends on how it's delivered. I'll bet it's probably more fun if it's face to face, but it's still doable in a virtual setting. And in fact, in a
Okay.
couple of weeks from now, we can actually invite some of our audience. If you'd like to learn more of how we can do those events, please contact us and we can show you how we can actually do even virtual style design thinking sessions with us. All right, Rajan. So we've had a healthy discussion,
That'd
so
be excellent.
many questions.
Can I get the name of the software that you just mentioned? Miro, is it M?
Miro, yes,
What's the
Miro.
name of
So
the app that MI? Okay,
RO,
okay. See, so
Miro.
now I'm
Yeah.
learning because mine is based
So
on what I used before. But looks like now you've got a better solution. Thanks,
yeah,
thanks. Now I can show off to my students.
this solution is excellent because it does the post-it thing very well. So it's easy to zoom in and zoom out, and you can cut and paste. It's very
Okay,
interactive. So next week we'll be showcasing Miro in
okay.
our
That's it.
session.
That if you
So
can. Thanks.
all
Okay.
right. So yeah, we
Right,
have
right.
to wrap up. But
Thanks.
before we go, Rajan, maybe before I tell our audience how they can get their certificates and join the Acadesia course accompanying this webinar, if you could share with us your final thoughts on design thinking and the session today to encourage our audience to give it a try. Please share your final thoughts.
Well, I've been a lecturer for 20 years, and this design thinking I've been using for the past 10 years. My teaching feedback score tends to be about 4.6 to 4.8 upon 5. All this is
Congratulations.
due to design thinking. Because of
Mm,
the way I use it, I design thinking really helps because it makes teaching or learning fun for the students, interesting. It opens up their minds, and the moment they realize that they are thinking differently, the students have a certain confidence that makes them feel good and appreciative of the effort they have taken. Yeah,
thank you so much,
that's it.
Rajan. Fantastic. If you
Yeah.
could hang back a little bit so we can chat after this. So, with that, dear audience, I just like to showcase and share my screen on how you can um, uh, get your certificates that are accompanying this course. So, let me share my screen. Okay, so if you would log in to Acadesia, if you have not logged into Acadesia before, so make sure that you go to www.acadesia.com and sign in to your Acadesia account. So you can just fill in your account here. And then if you do not have an account yet, make sure you sign up as a teacher. Okay, even if you're still studying to get a teacher's license or getting your bachelor's degree or diploma as a teacher, since this is really for educators and upskilling yourselves, please sign up as a teacher account. And then after you log in, make sure that you update your profile and all the contents. And you can see here, obviously, our it's almost like a LinkedIn or Facebook discussion here in our Collab Ed community. So you can chat and share ideas, ask questions. We'd be happy to answer them, including when the next design thinking course is. And then go here to Skill Ed. And in Skill Ed, you will be able to search the course Design Thinking. Is it useful to educators in the classroom? So this is one of our free courses for now. Make sure that you enroll and then sign up. And once you enroll in the course, just complete the reflection, video submission, and exit survey. And after this, your course will, your certificate of completion will be emailed to you. It'll look something like this. Okay, so this is a digital blockchain certificate that we offer as part of your professional development units. When you complete our webinar for today, you'll receive this in your email address, and you can even attach this to your LinkedIn accounts. So make sure to search for this course, Design Thinking. Is it useful for educators? And earn your certificates that way. Create your AcadAsia account to do so. All right. So with that, thank you so much again, Rajan. It was a pleasure having you. And on behalf of AcadAsia, again, I'm Roy Paton. Catch you again next week. We'll have Technology Tuesday. So I will be demonstrating Miro. So Miro is one of the design thinking tools that you can use online to deliver very interesting design thinking approaches and engagements with your class and with your learners. Okay, so thank you so much again. Make sure to sign up. We've posted the sign up link in the chat as well as here on screen if you want to join us for the Miro session, and I can demonstrate to you. And then a couple of weeks from now, we'll even have design thinking sessions for all of you. Please subscribe, follow AcadAsia to find out when these design thinking sessions will be available. It's important that you guys upskill and experience the power of design thinking yourselves. All right, so on behalf of AcadAsia, thank you so much to all our friends from all over, from India, from Singapore, Malaysia, Cambodia, Thailand, all our friends, Philippines. Thank you so much. See you next week, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.